My son kicked me out of my husband's funeral, but the lawyer discovered an incredible secret. Helen stood in the shadows of the small-town church, the air thick with mourning. Just hours before, they had buried Charlie, her husband, her rock, and the man whose kindness built bridges in their community. But now she clutched the cold wood of a pew, her heart aching with grief and fear. She had lost Charlie, yet a different battle loomed, one with Jake, her son, whose simmering resentment pierced through the sorrowful hymns that filled the room. "You never listened to us, Mom. You always made it about your image. Our family's legacy is a farce." His voice cut through her like glass. The church felt like a cage, and within its dusty confines, she was caged by expectations and feelings she could not voice. The echoes of Jake's accusations hung heavily in the air. He had stormed out in a fury, leaving her behind, the bittersweet pain of his words slicing through her resolve. The last thing she wanted right now was to wear the mask of a stoic mother. But her culture demanded it. Society expected her to be strong. And inside, she felt like she was crumbling, pieces of her identity scattering like leaves in autumn. Could she be both brave and broken? In the aftermath, Helen's feet found their way to Tom's office, the sweet scent of old books enveloping her as she recounted a love story now tainted by anger. "He was everything," she confessed, her voice a ragged whisper. "But I couldn't save him, and now I can't save Jake from this bitterness." Tom listened intently, his gaze warm yet piercing. His wisdom was like a balm on her wounds, even if it couldn't stop the ache. "You need to know what he left behind," he said, sliding a file across the desk. "Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now, let's continue. A scholarship fund for local at-risk youth. It was a revelation that struck her hard. Charlie hadn't just been a mechanic. He had been a silent guardian, giving part of his paycheck to help those who needed it most. A kindness hidden from her. The heart-wrenching irony was suffocating. Jake's resentment tangled with her grief, a noose tightening around the memory of the man they both loved. She had felt so much anger at being painted as a fraud, but now she wondered if they both were. Her living in the shadow of Charlie's legacy, and Jake caught in his pain, unwilling to see the man beyond the mechanic. As she navigated this new knowledge, a flicker of hope ignited in her, a determination to honor the hidden sides of Charlie's life while trying to reconnect with a son lost in hatred. But doubts haunted her. How could she confront Jake without further fracturing their fragile relationship? As she stepped outside, the chill of the evening air wrapped around her like a shroud. Her heart raced with a mix of resolve and trepidation. Would Jake be willing to see the truth, or would she be met with a wall of grief and anger raised high? The stakes loomed terrifyingly high, and she wondered if she could break through the darkness to reach him before he faded completely. What revelation would be the balm to heal the wounds, and was he even ready to hear what she had to say? With every step toward Jake's place, the uncertainty clawed at her, leaving her breathless in anxiety. Helen's footsteps felt heavier with each passing moment as she approached Jake's apartment, a mundane brick building that suddenly seemed to loom ominously in her mind. The weight of expectation bore down on her, suffocating her with every stride. Each step was a reminder of the wreckage their relationship had become. She was nervous, her hands trembling slightly, but there was a quiet resolve brewing deep within her, urging her forward. As she reached the door, she hesitated, her heart drumming in her chest like a war drum. Could she find the words to express what she felt? She had spent years crafting her role as the strong, proud mother, but now that identity felt wholly inadequate. Maybe Jake was right. Perhaps she had been so focused on preserving the family's image that she neglected the emotional connection they once shared. Could she reclaim her rawness, her vulnerability, and still be strong? Taking a deep breath, she knocked lightly, flinching as the sound echoed ominously. He opened the door, anger and confusion painting his features. "What do you want, Mom?" he asked, his voice strained yet revealing his own hurt. "I want to talk," she said, her voice steadier than she felt, "about Charlie, about us." He studied her, his expression hardened. "You think I want to hear anything about him? You should have been there instead of him." The accusation hung in the silence, each word a bitter reminder of the fracture that had grown between them. Helen's chest tightened. How could she reach him through this barricade of grief? "I know you're hurting," she replied, summoning her courage. "I am too. But I've learned something about your father that you didn't know." He scoffed, stepping back as though her words were poisonous. "What could you possibly know? He was your husband, and you ignored the truth about him." "No," she countered, fire igniting within her. "I didn't ignore it. I was blind to it. He was giving, Jake. He was more than just a mechanic. He was helping kids in this town, kids just like you. He created a scholarship fund." That last sentence struck a nerve. Jake's eyes softened for a fleeting moment, but the anger quickly returned. "Did you ever think to ask him, or were you too busy pretending everything was perfect?" His words landed like stones. "You're right," she admitted, her voice cracking. "I was so wrapped up in my world, in my grief, that I didn't see him, the entire man he was. But he loved you deeply, more than I could express. His kindness, it was who he was." A flicker of uncertainty crossed Jake's face. "So what? Does it change anything for me?" "It might change everything," she ventured, stepping closer. "If we can honor him together, really understand who he was, perhaps we can start healing. He would hate that we're fighting like this." For the first time, silence filled the space not with tension, but the profound weight of possibility. Helen felt her heart start to race, a fragile thread of hope gathering strength. Would he allow her in? Would he let her share this part of his father's legacy, transforming the hostility into connection? But before she could speak again, Jake's face contorted with doubt. "What if it's too late for us?" he asked, the veneer of confidence fracturing. Maybe it would be, but she was willing to dive into the unknown, to confront everything they had let fester between them. Was he ready to join her on that path? The question loomed larger than her fear, and she was prepared to push forward. "Maybe it's not too late," she whispered, a fragile hope flickering in her chest. But the next moment could shatter that hope completely or give way to a new beginning. As his gaze dropped, she sensed the internal battle raging within him. But one thing was clear. The time had come to confront the truth, not just about Charlie, but about themselves. Would they be strong enough to face it together? The silence stretched, thickening the air between them until it felt almost tangible. Helen could see the multitude of emotions shifting across Jake's face. Anger waged war with confusion, and uncertainty battled with grudging recognition of her words. "Why now?" he finally asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Why didn't you say anything before?" Her instinct was to deflect, to shield herself from the blame. But as she searched his eyes, the truth struck her with undeniable clarity. This wasn't simply about past failures. It was about a future they might still forge together, if given the chance. "I was afraid," she confessed, her voice quaking. I thought I could protect you by keeping our family secret sealed. I thought it was enough to keep the peace." A flicker of understanding passed over Jake's features, revealing a chasm of grief and confusion that no one had addressed before. She could see him processing this new revelation, the armor he wore starting to crack. "You protected me by lying?" His voice rose slightly, but there was a tremble of doubt there, too. "I didn't mean to lie," she replied, the weight of her past choices crashing down on her like a tide. "I thought I was doing what was right, but in trying to keep everything perfect, I failed you both, your father and you." The anger flared again, but beneath it lay an exposed vulnerability. "You keep saying that like it matters now," Jake said, emotion spilling through his carefully constructed defenses. "What can I do with that information? He's gone. Nothing changes that." Helen stepped forward, closing the distance between them. "It matters because we're still here, Jake. We can share his legacy together. We can find closure in understanding him, in keeping his memory alive." For a moment, she thought he might recoil, but instead, he paused as if considering the possibility. "Closure? This isn't some therapy session, Mom. This is real life," he said, swallowing hard. "I know," she affirmed, urgency racing through her veins. "But avoiding it won't help either of us. I can't change the past, but I can change how we move forward. He was good, and he cared deeply. And you have so much of him in you." Jake's expression faltered, mired in memories that were both painful and beautiful. Helen's heart raced. This was a pivotal moment. If he let her in, they could heal together. Yet the specter of doubt still hung over them. "What if I can't forgive you, or him?" Jake's voice trembled with uncertainty, yet there was an undercurrent of hope. "Then we start there, together. I'll show you the good in him. We will face all of it, even if it hurts. It's not too late for us, Jake." Fighting against the torrent of emotion, she realized she was ready to face whatever might come next, to dissect her past mistakes and forge something new from the ashes. She was prepared to embrace the vulnerability she had long shunned, to confront her fears. A tentative spark ignited between them in that moment, a hint of possibility. Would he take the leap with her? But as she gazed into his eyes, a sudden resolve hardened within her. "Whatever it takes," she whispered, "I won't give up on you." Just then, a loud bang from the hallway jolted them back to reality. Someone was abruptly entering the building. The sound shattered their fragile moment. Helen felt her heart stutter. Who could it be? "Nothing certain yet, Jake," she said urgently, scanning his face. "We have to be ready for anything." As the door swung open, she knew this unexpected intrusion could change everything. Who would it be, and how would they react to the fragile truce she was desperately trying to establish with her son? The door creaked open, revealing a shadowy figure that took a moment to gather itself in the frame. Helen exhaled sharply. It was Andrew, her late husband's business partner. His presence was unexpected, casting an immediate pall over the charged atmosphere. For a fleeting moment, Jake's expression hardened, a wall sliding back into place, shielding him from the vulnerability they had just begun to explore. "Why is he here?" he muttered, an edge creeping back into his tone. "I don't know," Helen replied, her mind racing to piece together the implications of Andrew's arrival. "But we'll find out." Andrew stepped into the room, his demeanor a blend of concern and urgency. "I thought I might find you here," he said, locking eyes with Helen. The solemnity in his gaze hinted at something significant. Her instincts flared. "There's something we need to discuss about your husband's affairs." The air thickened once more, tension replacing the tentative bond Helen and Jake had started to forge. "What about it?" she asked, her heart pounding as anxiety wove through her. Andrew hesitated, glancing at Jake as if reading the unspoken words hanging in the air. "It's about the will and some documents I stumbled upon. There are things you might not know, Helen, things that could change everything." Helen's breath hitched. She exchanged a sidelong glance with Jake, who had gone ashen, his emotions veering from confusion to apprehension. The fragile moment of connection they had shared felt distant, overshadowed by the weight of potentially explosive revelations. "What do you mean?" Jake interjected, voice tight. "What things?" Andrew took a step closer, his brow furrowing. "It's complicated, and I didn't want to bring this up without consulting you first, especially after," he faltered, gesturing vaguely toward the loss they both shared. "But you have to understand, the business was more than just a job for your father. It was part of something bigger. And if I'm right, there might be conflicts that affect you both." "Conflicts?" Helen echoed, her mind racing. Each word tugged at an old wound, reopening the question of how well she knew her husband, how much he had concealed. Jake crossed his arms defensively, his interior battle evident. "What are you saying? Are you implying there's something wrong with my father's legacy? What could possibly be wrong with that?" Andrew shifted uncomfortably. "There's a partnership agreement. It's not just about finances, but about the roles he's played and the people he's been involved with. Some are complicated, to say the least." Helen's heart sank. The momentum they had built moments earlier felt fragile. "What do we need to do?" she asked, desperate to regain control over the situation they were thrust into. Andrew drew a breath, steadying himself. "I need your signatures to access more of the records and see everything that was hidden. It's not just about the business, it's about understanding your husband's real intentions." Jake stared at Andrew, the tension coiling tighter as uncertainty flickered in his eyes. "And why should we trust you?" Those words echoed the theme of doubt that had underscored their challenge. Who was trustworthy in this game of shadows? "Because I'm here for you both," Andrew insisted, his voice carrying an earnest gravity. "I want to protect the legacy your father cherished. But if there are threats at play that you weren't aware of, then we need to confront them together." Helen felt the amalgamation of fear and determination boiling up within her. Here they stood, on the precipice not just of unveiling family secrets, but exploring the spaces that her husband's life had filled with complexity. "I can't let you make all the decisions for us anymore," she said finally, anchoring herself in newfound strength. "We will face this, and whatever we uncover, we will handle it as a family." Her gaze met Jake's, searching for a flicker of agreement, of solidarity, just as the intricacies of their journey loomed larger ahead. They had come too far to falter now. But the shadow of unresolved mysteries lingered, igniting a new intensity within Helen's spirit. As Andrew prepared to unfold what lay beneath the surface, Helen realized that this was only the beginning. "Let's do this," Jake said quietly, albeit reluctantly, mirroring the resolve she felt brewing within them both. However, a nagging question surfaced in her mind as Andrew opened his briefcase, a question that rattled her to the core. What if the legacy held more than just memories? What if it held the key to their future, or a path to even deeper betrayal? The gravity of their next step began to settle over them like a thick fog, and Helen knew they had to tread carefully. Yet the urgency surged onward. A truth was waiting to be unearthed, and with it, a choice to be made, one that could redefine everything. Helen's heart raced as Andrew unfurled the files, his fingers brushing over the top papers like an impatient orchestra conductor eager to unveil the first notes of an unsettling symphony. Each document he revealed felt heavy with potential repercussions, the implications swirling around her mind like a dark storm cloud. "Here," Andrew said, handing her a yellowed envelope, its corners frayed with age. "This is the partnership agreement. It might not look like much, but it includes clauses you need to see." As Helen took the envelope, her skin tingled with a familiar sense of dread mixed with anticipation. How could contracts and legalities carry the weight of her husband's life? She slowly peeled it open, revealing the typewritten pages within. Her eyes darted over names, dates, and clauses that felt more like a betrayal than a business document. "Is there anything in there that you're not comfortable with?" Jake asked, his voice carrying an edge that made her flinch. He was still shielding himself, still reluctant to confront whatever skeletons lay buried within their shared legacy. "It's just business," Helen said, more to herself than to him. The words barely echoed her own doubt. "We signed agreements ourselves." But that was different, she realized. They had built a life together, a partnership forged with trust and love, in contrast to whatever had transpired between her husband and Andrew. "There are personal stakes here that we have to understand," Andrew pressed, cutting through her thoughts. "Your husband's decisions didn't just impact the business. They could have implications for both of you." Jake ran a hand through his hair, pacing back and forth like a coiled spring. "What do you mean? What did he do that could affect Helen or me?" "Let's start with these provisions," Andrew replied, gesturing back to the contract. "They suggest that your father had taken on liabilities, potentially risky partnerships with individuals who might not share your best interests." The practicalities became a ticking clock, driving toward an inevitable explosion of truth. Helen felt a deep twist in her stomach, a foreboding that she had turned a corner from which retreat was impossible. The shadows of her husband's dealings began to cast doubt on the very foundation of her family's beliefs. "What kinds of risks?" she asked, her voice more steady than she felt. She was taking back control, recognizing that knowledge might be their only ally in the storm ahead. Andrew opened another file, his face taut with concern. There might be unresolved debts, potential legal battles, or even individuals who see opportunities in this tragedy. You need to be aware. If anything is amiss, it can put both your futures at risk. For the first time, Helen realized these discussions weren't merely about the past, but seemed like a map leading to a possible future she had never envisioned. What if their next decision redirected the course of their lives? "What are our options?" Jake asked, his tone shifting, the protective shell beginning to show cracks. "We could just walk away, let it die with my father." "Can you really?" Andrew shot back, his urgency piercing through them. "Just turn your back? The legacy doesn't belong to one person. It belongs to you both, and ignoring it will only lead to greater issues for you down the line." Helen locked eyes with Jake, recognizing the same flicker of determination kindling in him that she felt growing. Their shared fortitude could fuel a force that confronted the indiscretions of the past head-on. "No, we can't turn our backs," Helen said, asserting her resolve. "We owe it to ourselves to fight for what's ours, to understand everything. If there's something threatening our lives, our future, we must face it." With those words, a clear path began to emerge, the mists of uncertainty parting enough to reveal that they could navigate this uncharted territory together. Helen sensed the moment was pivotal, not merely a challenge, but a defining crossroads for their relationship and their individual strength. As they each took a breath, she felt a rush of hope surge through her. She knew it wouldn't be easy, but she was ready. The walls Jake had erected began to feel permeable, and she sought to bridge the distance created by grief and fear to expand into a shared future. "Let's start with this," Andrew said, holding up a document, "but know that deeper challenges lie ahead. The more we uncover, the more we might need to confront." Helen's heart thudded with both fear and excitement. She was no longer a passive observer of her life. She was active, engaged, ready to fight. Whatever awaited them, she felt a flicker of truth, not just about her husband's past, but about her own growing strength. As Andrew spoke, a new anxiety settled in, a question that loomed larger. What if facing the truth required more than they were willing to give? The moment of taking action solidified. Helen felt both exhilarated and terrified. And just as they prepared to delve deeper into the wreckage of the past, another thought broke through the haze, echoing in her mind. With every layer peeled back, what if they uncovered betrayals that could splinter their family irrevocably? What did they truly want to reveal, and could they handle the consequences of the truths that lay in wait? The silence that followed Andrew's last statement hung heavy in the air, an unspoken agreement to confront their reality head-on. Helen could feel the weight of the yellowed pages in her hands, not just as pieces of paper, but as anchors pulling her closer to whatever wreckage lay ahead. She turned the documents over, running her fingers over the inked words, as if hoping they might yield secrets more profound than any mere transaction. "What's your experience with bankruptcies?" she asked Andrew suddenly, her voice steady despite the undercurrents of uncertainty. Each new question steadied her resolve, a way to reclaim her narrative from the shadows that loomed ominously over her. Andrew's brow furrowed, an acknowledgement of the multifaceted issues at play. "It can spiral quickly," he admitted, meeting her gaze with the seriousness it deserved. "But it's not just the debts. The reputations, the relationships, those can be even more hazardous." Helen absorbed his words, leaning into the gravity of the situation. This was no longer just about Jake's father or past mistakes. It was a collective responsibility that now evoked a sense of urgency. So we need to evaluate the stakeholders involved. Who's connected, and how deep do the roots go? Jake shifted uneasily, the previous moments of shared determination now facing the cold wave of uncertainty. Do we even know who we're dealing with? My father was a master at keeping things compartmentalized. There was a moment of silence where the weight of Jake's words sank in. Helen knew it would take more than mere documents to untangle this web. It would require courage, trust, and most critically, a full understanding of the people who surrounded them. Then we start there. We need names, connections, anything that could inform our next steps. "Don't you think it's reckless?" Jake interjected, his protective impulses rising again. "What if we stir up something better left alone?" "No," Helen replied firmly, her tone more forceful than she might have intended. "What's reckless is to let ignorance govern us. We can't live in a vacuum. If we're going to rebuild, we need to understand the whole picture." Feeling her words settle between them, she recognized that the conversation had shifted. It was no longer just about confronting the past, but about harnessing its lessons to shape their future. Each layer they peered into offered a potential stone upon which they could rebuild, or maybe a hidden trap that could jeopardize everything. As conversations blossomed, their hands instinctively grasped documents, an unconscious pledge to enlighten themselves. Helen's mind began working through potential avenues and strategies. She needed to mobilize resources and set a course of action. The stark reality that the life they had once taken for granted was now at risk thrummed in her veins. In moments of stillness, Helen felt that flicker of determination rise within her. She was realizing that she could carve out an identity beyond being a daughter-in-law, a caretaker. She could become a strategist, an advocate for herself and Jake. The concept of agency surged forward, and she found her footing slowly but surely. Helen opened her laptop and began typing a list of people in her head. Family friends, old colleagues, anyone involved with Dad's business. Let's compile everything. We'll segment the individuals by relevance and potential risk. "That's a good start," Andrew said quickly, as though he felt the shift in energy. From there, we can create a timeline, events, actions taken, and outcomes to ground our discussions. Exactly, Helen affirmed, feeling a growing sense of power in her decision-making. Each name they added would serve as a beacon of knowledge, illuminating paths that had previously been hidden. As they spoke and the pain of their reality began to transform into action, another tension coiled at the back of Helen's mind, nagging at her free will as if reminding her of limits yet to be tested. If this was merely the beginning, what awaited them on the other side of their research? Did they truly have the fortitude to face the realities that would arise from the darkness? Uneasy excitement bubbled within her, pushing her to grasp at this evolving identity. Now more than ever, she felt the weight of their legacy, a narrative she would help to write, even amidst the risks. Closing the lid on her laptop, Helen turned her gaze back to Jake. We need a plan to approach these individuals. Confidence is key. Jake's face transformed, the remnants of fear melting into something more resolute. I'm with you, he affirmed, and just like that, the foundation strengthened beneath their shared vision. Yet the question lingered, ready to pounce as they prepared to unveil layers of treachery and betrayals. Were they truly equipped for the emotional toll that this journey would demand? With mounting anticipation, Helen knew that their first contact with the past would set the tone for everything to come, and within her grew the awareness that the facade of security had already begun to shatter. Whatever awaited them would demand not just resilience, but an unwavering grasp of their own identities, and perhaps an emergence into a power they never fully recognized they possessed. Let's be ready for whatever unfolds, Helen whispered, instilling her words with a steely conviction. They would face the darkness together, but the question remained, how deep did the rabbit hole go, and what truths would they ultimately unearth? The faint buzz of anticipation reverberated in the air as Helen and Jake began to map out their strategy. The sheer enormity of their task was daunting. Yet, as Helen clutched the stack of documents, she felt an unexpected resolve surging through her veins to embrace this chaos instead of shying away from it. First and foremost, she began, tapping a finger against her laptop's keyboard, we need concrete information on each person we suspect has connections to the business. As fingers danced across the keys, she felt the power of taking control of the narrative. Each name she typed became a vital piece in their impending analysis, a step into their reclamation. Jake leaned over, his brow knitted in concentration. What if we host an informal meeting, gather stories under the guise of family remembrance? Too many people are tied to the past. We need to draw them out, see what they know. A strategic probe, Helen noted. That could work. It may bring unexpected allies, but it could also draw attention to the instability. We have to weigh our approach. Andrew's gaze darted between them, sensing the synergy building. But it may unveil hidden dynamics too. Think about it. Maybe we can gain their trust, at least initially. People are more willing to share wounds than strengths. I think that's brilliant, Helen interjected, invigorated by the bond forming between them. Planning was akin to weaving a tapestry. It required insight, patience, and a clear understanding of how each thread connects to the other. Yet, as they plotted their course, Helen wrestled with the demons in her mind. What if they uncovered her own vulnerabilities, her own missteps laid bare for scrutiny? In this climb toward strategic positioning, there lay the potential for self-revelation, a prospect that both fascinated and terrified her. As the evening drew on, the discussions peeled back layers of their personal histories, revealing ambitions they had forfeited in silence. It was clear that Helen, a former finance whiz, understood the intricacies of economic survival. This isn't just about mapping out who owes what. It's about understanding how emotional investment distorts business transactions. That's insightful, Andrew encouraged, noting the glimmer of confidence in her eyes. You hold knowledge of value we can leverage. His words spun in her mind, igniting a passion long buried beneath obligations. But it was Jake's penetrating gaze that nudged her to confront the shadow of self-doubt. What if we draft a direct approach for the past business associates? Present ourselves as advocates for the family? Perhaps they would open up to us if they see a genuine intention to heal. The metaphorical weight of her past suddenly felt lighter. Strategizing turned into a dance of confidence, of choices that propelled her toward a version of herself she thought inaccessible. Yes, let's do that, but with caution, she cautioned. We need to maintain the control of our ship without letting the undercurrents pull us down. As they plotted their paths forward, Helen recognized she had shed her previous identity. This wasn't merely about Jake's inheritance or familial obligations. It was about discovering the depth of her purpose. Empowered by the knowledge of her capabilities, she felt emboldened. Yet, as they finalized the meticulous details of their plan, doubt lurked like an uninvited guest at the table. How many truths would they unveil, and were they truly prepared for the ramifications? Helen knew they were approaching a critical juncture. Each contact they made would not only provide information, but could also potentially challenge everything they thought they knew. Would they emerge from this unscathed, or would the truths they uncovered reshape their identities in ways they couldn't yet fathom? Tomorrow we move, Helen declared, her tone a mix of excitement and trepidation. Let's pace ourselves. We hold the keys now, but the doors they unlock may bury us alive or release us into freedom. That night, as Helen lay in bed, she contemplated the following day, the initial contacts with people who held fragments of their family's story. The tension felt palpable, electric, but also meaningful as she embraced this opportunity for growth. She realized with both fear and clarity that their journey had the potential to not just heal old wounds, but herald a rebirth for herself and Jake. If they could harness strength from their past, they might build a new future, a future that required not just bravery, but honesty with themselves. But the nagging questions synthesized amid her thoughts. Would the truths they dug up confirm their growth or bring shattering revelations that could threaten their newfound paths? Tomorrow would be the beginning of revelations, but at what cost? With the dawn, they would step into unfamiliar terrain, a battleground of shadows and light waiting to test their resolve. The morning sun heralded the day with a wash of golden light that poured into Helen's bedroom, illuminating the fragments of doubt that clung stubbornly to her. She sat at her kitchen table, her laptop open, staring at the digital notes they had painstakingly compiled. Each name was a prism, reflecting not just potential allies but looming confrontations. Today would require decisiveness and focus. There would be no room for hesitation. As she sipped her coffee, Helen's thoughts darted between the meeting's significance and the fear of the unknown. She had spent years building a life that distanced her from familial entanglements. Now she was wading back into waters rife with unresolved issues. Could she balance her deep-seated ambitions with the messiness of family dynamics? Shouldn't she prioritize herself? The clang of dishes snapped her from her reverie. Jake entered the kitchen, his eyes glassy with the early morning haze, yet glimmering with determination. "Ready?" he asked, the casualness of his tone contradicting the weight of their undertaking. Helen's mind skipped, weighing the implications of today. "As ready as I'll ever be," she replied, her voice steady, betraying none of the tumult within. They exchanged a nod, an unspoken pact that they would navigate the complexity together. Their first visit was to a former business partner of Jake's father, a man named Gerald, who had grudgingly agreed to share his insights. The drive felt surreal. Helen focused on her breathing, trying to silence the incipient doubt swirling in her mind. Each bit of conversation felt like a piece of armor. She would face whatever Gerald unveiled with poise. Upon arriving at Gerald's office, an imposing edifice of glass and steel, they were greeted with a stiff handshake. The man bore an imposing presence, surrounded by accolades and trophies that hinted at a successful career, yet betrayed a lingering bitterness. Helen felt her heart quicken as she settled into her seat across the conference table, her resolve hardening. "Your father was one of a kind," Gerald began, looking past them as if recalling the past was a bitter pill. "In business, loyalty means everything, but so does knowing when to distance yourself." He spoke in a detached manner, prompting Helen to lean in. There was an undercurrent of emotion beneath his words, masked by the polished veneer of his success. Jake interjected. "What do you mean by that?" His question was straightforward, but Helen sensed the unsteady foundation of their question. It was one thing to seek information, it was another to dig deeper without losing footing. "Yes," Helen added carefully, "understanding those nuances could be pivotal for us." She felt a flicker of empowerment. Acknowledging their vulnerability was key to their inquiry. "Your father," Gerald hesitated, the moment stretching like a taut wire. "He had enemies. Not everyone who smiled at him meant well." Helen's stomach knotted, suspicion coiling around her. This wasn't merely about business. There were personal implications tied to this. She could almost feel the past creeping in, preparing to confront them. "What kind of enemies?" she pressed, her voice steadier than the whirlwind in her chest. Each revelation would increase her understanding, would shape her into the person she needed to become. The nervousness was palpable, electrifying her senses. With a heavy sigh, Gerald shifted in his seat. "I can tell you who they are, but how much do you really want to know? Sometimes knowing the truth can come at a cost." Helen felt the walls closing in on her, the air thick with anxiety. This was her moment, a chance to either embrace the chaos or be consumed by it. Her hand instinctively brushed against the stack of documents they had created together, reminders of her purpose to reclaim agency, to pull on the threads of her family's history without fear. "We need to know everything," she declared, her voice steady, slicing through the tension like a blade. Jake's eyes darted to her, a mixture of surprise and admiration dancing across his features. As Gerald leaned back, his expression unreadable, Helen braced for his response, aware that they had crossed an invisible boundary. Would he reveal what would shatter their world, or offer them the keys to their past? With the bleak uncertainty of the moment hanging in the air, Helen understood the weight of their journey, each step echoing in her mind. She was no longer casting shadows on her ambitions. She was light itself, illuminating the path ahead. But the question loomed larger now. Was the truth they sought worth the consequences it might unleash? And in that charged silence, a new tension coiled within her, a deep, nagging question. What had her father truly hidden, and would it shape them or destroy them? Gerald's lips tightened, the weight of unspoken history lingering like a storm cloud. Helen felt the air thrum with unsaid words, each second stretching their anticipation into an indelible tension. She focused her thoughts, as if willing clarity through sheer determination. "Your father had dealings that weren't exactly clean," he finally said, each word soaked in caution. "And enemies often lurk in the shadows of success. They can strike when you least expect it." Helen's pulse quickened. The notion of hidden adversaries lurking beneath familial ties was unsettling, yet she understood that unveiling these truths could be crucial. The revelation crackled like live wire. She readied herself for what lay ahead, not just for the family secrets, but for her own awakening. "What kind of dealings?" Her voice was firmer now, steadiness creeping into the essence of her inquiry. The spiraling doubts from before began to dissipate, replaced by a burgeoning sense of purpose. She had to confront whatever lay between her family's past and her present ambitions. Gerald leaned forward, fingers steepled under his chin. Power plays, manipulation, tactics that would make respectable men blush. Your father felt invincible, but that was his curse. In that moment, Helen recognized a facet of her father's legacy that she had chosen to ignore: his pursuit of power, the shadow of untrustworthy alliances. Could she really proceed without uncovering the wounds of the past? This was no longer merely about family. It had escalated into a self-discovery mission, fostering the courage to embrace her lineage. Messy, complicated, but hers. "Help us understand," Jake implored, the urgency in his voice echoing Helen's sentiments. "Why is this important to us now?" "Because," Gerald's tone lowered, "the enemies of your father may still watch, and their reach could extend to you. You need to know how to stand your ground." The implications hit Helen with the force of a slap. She was now deeper in than she had ever planned. The weight of danger peppered with a sense of dilemma washed over her. Did she want to be armed with the truth, or was ignorance bliss? She clenched her fists. This wasn't the time to falter. "Tell us," she demanded, her voice unwavering. "We will face whatever comes next. The truth will not paralyze us. We'll turn it into a strategy." A flicker of admiration danced in Jake's eyes, a silent acknowledgement of her resolve. Gerald cleared his throat and began to outline the connections between her father and rival businesses, detailing whispers of betrayal and broken alliances. Each name he dropped felt like a stone dropped into a still pond. Ripples expanded, touching every facet of Helen's existence. As Gerald unraveled the thread of deceit, Helen wrestled with the implications. They painted her father less like an unequivocal hero, more like a man draped in shadows. The weight of realization tightened around Helen's chest. If her father had gambled with lives and trust, she would need to navigate that tainted landscape carefully. With every detail, a flicker of clarity spawned within her. Understanding her father didn't mean she had to look like him. Instead, she could carve out her path, one rooted in transparency and ethics. The idea thrilled and terrified her. The meeting dragged on, but the end felt nearer than she anticipated. As they finished, Helen's mind raced. Facing down her father's enemies felt colossal, but facing herself, her ambitions intertwined with his legacy, was the real front line. As they stepped out of the office into the waning light, a sense of determination began to flow through Helen. She had crossed a threshold. Ambiguity morphed into promise. Yet another concern gnawed at her. Encounters with those menacing shadows awaited. They were no longer just whispers from her father's past. They were armed truths demanding confrontation. In the embrace of the setting sun, Helen felt invigorated by the challenge ahead. "What's next?" Jake asked, breaking her concentration. While her heart pulsed with a mix of anticipation and unease, Helen crafted an answer that felt primal. "We prepare to meet them." No more secondhand truths. We find the heart of this mystery ourselves. With the resolve solidifying into her core, Helen understood they were now bound not only by the game of inheritance, but the inevitability of choices that could either bind or liberate. The next phone call could unleash the storm, chasing them into an even murkier abyss. But within the darkness, she sensed an unprecedented chance for transformation looming. Her father's mismanaged legacy could become her powerful stepping stone. The time had come to face not just the adversaries hidden in the shadows, but the truth that would shape her identity forever. As they stepped into the night, Helen resolved to confront the unknown, that just around the corner lay an encounter that would change everything. Would she rise to claim her father's legacy or fight the shadows attempting to consume her? The sound of rain drumming against the windshield filled the car as Helen and Jake embarked on their next journey. With hearts racing and minds steeled, they were on their way to meet with Margaret, a former associate of Charlie's, an individual who had been privy to the deals and betrayals that had stained their family's past. "Are you ready for this?" Jake turned to Helen, uncertainty flickering in his eyes. Gone were the defensive barriers he had once held. Instead, there was a vulnerability she had only recently begun to witness. She could see now he was as determined to reclaim his own identity as she was. "Yes," Helen replied, her voice firm, despite the ebb of apprehension weaving through her. They had already shed enough illusions. She was determined that nothing would stand in their way now. Arriving at a nondescript cafe, they stepped inside to find Margaret seated in the corner. Her presence commanded attention, with an intensity that hinted at the wisdom of someone who had navigated the uncomfortable complexities of business. As they approached, a flicker of recognition crossed her face. "Charlie's family," Margaret stated, her tone neither warm nor cold, but layered with experiences that spoke volumes. "I didn't expect to see you both now." Helen took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment pressing on her. "We need to talk about Charlie's legacy, what he left behind," she began, maintaining eye contact as if to anchor the resolve she felt burgeoning within her. With practiced ease, Margaret gestured for them to sit. Her demeanor shifted into one of cautious curiosity. "It's a tangled web. Are you prepared for that?" "We're ready for the truth, no matter how messy," Jake blurted, his voice filled with a rawness that both startled and encouraged Helen. This vulnerable honesty felt like a new chapter opening before them, giving them agency. Margaret leaned back and folded her hands. "Then let's dive right in." As the conversation wove through Charlie's acquaintances and complicated dealings, it wasn't just the revelations that hit home, it was also Margaret's perspective. He had played games not merely to gain power, but out of deep-seated insecurities, a need to be seen as indispensable. Helen's heart raced, understanding that these weren't just transactions. They were shades of a man trying to combat the fears that had ultimately defined his actions. Jake's expression morphed through a spectrum of emotions, from surprise to disappointment, as the pieces of his father's character began to unravel. "But all those times I looked up to him, how could he balance loyalty and betrayal like this?" "It's the duality of life, especially in business," Margaret replied, her gaze steady. "People are seldom one thing. They wear masks as easily as they breathe." Helen felt an overwhelming sense of empathy wash over her for both her husband and son. Had she too worn a mask, hiding from the burdens of truth? "Margaret, what do you suggest we do? How do we mend this broken legacy?" she asked, fear intermingling with hope. "You take control. You rewrite the narrative that your father left behind," Margaret said boldly. "Transform this tumult into something that honors both his gifts and his failures. You can do more than just salvage his memory. You can empower yourselves through it." Helen's heart quickened as she envisioned their future, one not shackled by the past, but thriving in understanding. "We could establish something in his name, a trust that supports at-risk youth, a legacy not tainted by the shadows, but illuminated by the love we can share, fostering change rather than hiding from it." "You'd need to align with people who echo your intentions," Margaret cautioned, "but the path is grueling and it requires resilience." "Then that's what we'll do," Jake affirmed, his voice steadying with each word. "We don't just want to restore his image, we want to honor the man he was." In that moment, Helen witnessed a profound shift within Jake. The boy, burdened with anger, had begun to reclaim his own identity, intertwined but unencumbered by his father's legacy. The conversation evolved into strategizing how to approach the community, ideas blossoming as they navigated every aspect of what this new vision could entail. It wasn't merely about uncovering hidden truths, it was about channeling them into a future that would honor Charlie's imperfect journey. As the meeting drew to a close, Helen felt the warmth of newfound clarity envelop her. This journey had urged her to confront fear, the unknown, and her self-imposed mask. Recognizing shortcomings in herself and those around her had bolstered her sense of agency. Outside the cafe, the rain had stopped. The air felt fresh and electric, suggesting the vigor of renewal. "We can do this together," she said, looking at Jake, feeling not just like a mother, but a partner. "Yes, we can," he replied, an affirming smile breaking through the remnants of the tumult they had weathered. "But we need to ensure it's real. We face the shadows together." In that moment, Helen understood that she had shed layers of fear, stepping into the light of her full potential. Not only had she been transformed through truth, but Jake too had evolved into someone willing to navigate his own path. With solid confidence and a shared sense of purpose, they set off, ready to reclaim their family legacy. Together, they would prove that even from the darkest shadows, they could cultivate a new light. This was their achievement, their undeniable growth and transformation manifested into a new beginning. Now, dear viewer, you need to subscribe immediately to the channel so you don't miss the next exclusive emotional stories. This is the moment to show your support. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and comment your reactions and theories about the ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Don't wait even one more second to share. True fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of supporting the channel through these crucial actions.